In the last few days, the world has watched with growing unease as tensions between Israel and Iran erupted into direct military confrontation. Missiles have been launched. Airstrikes have left destruction in their wake. Dozens are dead. But what exactly led to this sudden escalation? What's the real reason behind Israel's unexpected strike on Iran? In this video, we're going to break down everything we know, without taking sides, without sensationalism, just the facts, the background, and the deeper context that often gets buried in the noise. Let's take a closer look at what's really unfolding and why it matters far beyond the Middle East. The Israeli-Iranian relationship has been tense for decades, rooted in ideological, political, and strategic differences. But this recent wave of violence marks a sharp turn. According to the latest reports, the confrontation entered its third day with casualties mounting. Iran has lost at least 80 people, while Israel reports at least 10 deaths. These are not just numbers. They represent lives, families, and rising stakes in a region already burdened by conflict. Israel has described its assault on Iranian targets as a preventive strike. The official claim is that Iran posed an imminent threat, particularly in regard to its nuclear program. However, there seems to be little evidence, at least publicly available, to confirm that Iran was about to build a nuclear bomb. That raises a critical question. If the threat wasn't immediate, what actually triggered this attack? Israel's leadership, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has offered multiple justifications. The first and most widely circulated is the idea that Iran's nuclear ambitions posed a direct danger to Israeli security. This claim hinges on a recent report from the International Atomic Energy Agency, which criticized Iran for past violations of its commitments under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But the report didn't contain any new revelations. In fact, the information had already been known to most governments and international organizations involved. So, was this report really the emergency Israel cited to justify a preemptive strike? It's worth noting that for an attack to be truly preventive in the eyes of international law, there must be an immediate and unavoidable threat. Without new intelligence, this argument appears shaky. There's also talk of a decapitation strike, a military term for an effort to eliminate key individuals running a targeted program. In this case, Iran's nuclear efforts. But military analysts largely agree. Israel alone likely lacks the capability to destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure entirely, especially given how spread out and fortified those sites are. When we look at the actual targets of the Israeli strikes, the story becomes even more complex. Rather than focusing purely on nuclear sites, Israel has hit a range of targets, including missile bases, a gas field, an oil depot, and several government facilities. In addition, several high-profile assassinations were reportedly carried out. Among them was Ali Shamkhani, a former Iranian defense minister and close advisor to Iran's supreme leader. While his death hasn't been officially confirmed by Iranian state media, many international outlets report that he was killed. Shamkhani's name might not be widely known, but behind the scenes, he played a significant role in negotiations with the United States. If true, his assassination suggests the goal wasn't nuclear prevention. It may have been to disrupt diplomatic channels. This kind of tactic isn't new. Israel has a long history of targeted killings, often aiming to destabilize the leadership structures of organizations or governments it sees as hostile. The thinking is simple. Take out a leader, and the system around them may collapse. But history has shown that such outcomes are rarely that straightforward. Another possible explanation making the rounds: regime change. Prime Minister Netanyahu has directly appealed to the Iranian public, calling on them to rise against what he described as a repressive regime. It's not unusual for leaders to use this kind of rhetoric, especially in times of conflict, but it does raise eyebrows. The idea that Iranians, many of whom deeply value national sovereignty, would respond favorably to an external military strike is a complicated assumption. While opposition to the Islamic Republic exists within Iran, history has shown that external pressure often unites rather than divides a population. Ironically, something similar happened in Israel. Even Netanyahu's critics and members of the parliamentary opposition have largely rallied around the government since the attacks began. Patriotism, especially during moments of perceived external aggression, often overrides political differences. If Israel's publicly stated justifications don't fully hold up under scrutiny, what else could be at play? Some analysts believe this strike is not just about Iran. It's also about Israel's domestic and international position. Israel has faced growing criticism over its ongoing military campaign in Gaza, where humanitarian concerns have triggered global backlash. Major international bodies like the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice are now more vocal than ever. Arrest warrants and legal rulings are looming. Add to that a potential wave of countries preparing to recognize a Palestinian state, and you have a serious shift in the geopolitical wind. For Netanyahu, this might be a moment of political survival. A strike against a long-standing adversary like Iran could serve multiple purposes: redirecting attention, rallying domestic support, and reframing Israel's narrative on the global stage. By invoking familiar fears, such as Iran's threat to Israel's existence or historical trauma like the Holocaust, Netanyahu may be trying to reassert Israel's image as a state under siege, deserving of international support. Whether that strategy will work remains to be seen. Israel's military philosophy has long centered on the idea of security, a concept deeply embedded in its national identity. But what does security mean in this context? Critics argue that Israel's interpretation has expanded over time, from direct self-defense to a broader justification for regional military action, including in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and now, Iran. The risk, of course, is that such a strategy can never truly end. If security is defined as eliminating all potential threats, everywhere, forever, it becomes an endless mandate. This creates a volatile dynamic, not only for Israel but for the region at large. Every new strike invites the possibility of retaliation, escalation, and a broader conflict that pulls in global powers. So where do we go from here? That's the most difficult question of all. Will Iran respond further? Will global powers intervene diplomatically? Will the Israeli public continue to support the government's actions or begin to question them? As of now, the mood within Israel seems focused on survival. Reports mention long queues at stores, a population preparing for uncertainty. In this environment, political accountability often takes a back seat to immediate safety. And for Iran, the challenge will be to balance national pride, domestic pressure, and international diplomacy without inviting total war. The Israeli strike on Iran isn't just a headline. It's a turning point, not only in Israeli-Iranian relations, but potentially in the broader geopolitics of the Middle East. The reasons behind the attack are still being debated, and much remains unclear. What is clear, however, is that this moment will have consequences for diplomacy, for regional alliances, and for the people who live under the shadow of these decisions. As always, it's important to look beyond headlines and examine the deeper layers at play. Who benefits? What's being risked? And what does this tell us about the future of international relations? We'll be following this story closely. Until then, stay informed, stay thoughtful, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns like this one.